Welcome to 2.2 Accounting Systems, and it's page 360 of your textbook if you're following along. In our last section, we just briefly talked about what accounts payable, receivable clerks would do and accounting supervisors. So this section, we're going to go into their jobs a little more detailed. The accounting system for a business consists of all of the activities performed to provide the information needed to make business decisions. Managers rely on information provided by the accounting system to answer a variety of questions, like did we make a profit? Did the rate of profit to sales increase or decrease? Should we expand our business? Are sales increasing or decreasing? Are expenses increasing or decreasing? How effective or efficient are the employees? And which products are most profitable? So of course, any questions like that and providing answers will give the manager or the owner a good idea of how their business is going. Now, in order to be able to do that, you have to have a good accounting process in your plans. So the textbook talks about beta enterprises in the textbook, and it talks about here all the different systems. So there's a payroll system for this business, there's accounts receivable, accounts payable, there's something called a cash control system that we don't really know too much about yet, and a general ledger system. Beta Enterprises is a wholesaler of heating and refrigeration equipment. It buys entire units and replacement parts from the manufacturer and sells them to companies that in turn sell or install the equipment. It charges HST on its sales. The company's head office is in Ottawa and with branches across Canada as well. Beta's customers include fuel oil dealers, engineering firms, and mechanical equipment firms. So we'll start talking about the accounts payable system. The following 5 tasks make up the accounts payable system for Beta Enterprises. So this department processes purchase invoices, they record the purchase invoice, they pay their creditors, they update the creditors' accounts, and they prepare an schedule of accounts payable, which we did talk about in the last section. Okay, so the duties of accounts payable clerk would be to work on those 5 things I just already listed. So something like this would come across an employee's desk, and this shows what they have purchased. And they've purchased this from Western Supply, and it shows some HST and your total due. It also shows how many of something you got and what you got and the price. It tells you here what your terms are, how many days you have to pay it. So the first thing that the person that would be in charge of this would do is as soon as Beta Enterprises receives the purchase invoice, Mary, who is the person in charge, her first responsibility is to confirm that her company ordered the goods specified in the invoice and that the total amount of the invoice is correct. In a file of purchase orders, Mary locates the purchase order, 683, sent out about a month before by Beta to Western Supply Company. She checks to see that the order price and the invoice price are the same and that there's no mathematical errors. Next, she must find out if the goods have been received in good condition. The person who receives and checks the goods completes a receiving report and sends a copy to Mary, who then checks her file of receiving reports and locates one that shows the goods that have been received undamaged. She presents the 3 documents, that's the purchase order, the purchase invoice, and the receiving report to a supervisor for approval. The supervisor then records the purchases in the journal. The next thing, the approved invoice is returned to Mary, who records the amount owed to Western Supply Limited. First, Mary locates the account in the accounts payable ledger, and she increases the balance by entering a credit. Because remember that a liability increases on the credit side. So if this is our liability, it has a normal credit balance. It increases on this side, it decreases on this side. The invoice with the purchase order and receiving report attached is now placed in a date file until it's due to be paid within 30 days. The next thing she does is when the invoice is due to be paid, Mary removes the invoice from the date file. A check with a copy is prepared and the original check is sent to the creditor, who must receive payment no later than 30 days from the day of the invoice. The fourth thing that she's going to do is update the creditor's accounts. Using a copy of this check as her source of information, Mary now decreases the balance owed to Western Supply Limited. It's Mary's job to maintain an accurate record of the amount owed to each of the creditors. She does this by recording purchases and credits and payments as debits. Okay, the last thing is she prepares a schedule of accounts payable. So at the end of the month, she would make a list of everything that they now still owe to people. So if you want to look at it this way in this flow chart, she is the clerk, and then it shows you what she has to do. What she starts with dealing is approved purchase invoices and cash payments. She then deals with creditors' accounts and accounts payable ledgers, and then she has to make a schedule of accounts payable. Now, exactly the same thing happens with accounts receivable clerk. Now, I won't go through all of this with you, but it would start with something that looks like this. Okay, so now this is coming from the company Beta Enterprises, and it's being sold to customers. Okay, so if you want, you can go through that and read it. The one thing you have to make sure is that when they're selling something, they have to make sure they're putting the HST on there or the PST depending on what province they're in. So it's exactly the same thing. Okay, they're going to make a schedule of accounts receivable at the end of the month. Accounts receivable clerks, the flow chart looks like this. They're starting with sales invoice and cash. Then she's dealing with the customer accounts and accounts receivable ledger, and at the end making a schedule of accounts receivable. Now the nice thing with accounting these days is everybody's using computers. And this might be an example of one computer program that they might use. Now, unfortunately, in this course, we need to show you how to do it manually, and then a couple times throughout the course, I'll get you to look at things as it would look like if you were using a computerized system. Now, accounting supervisor, in the first two jobs descriptions, you learned about two accounting clerks at Beta Enterprises, the accounts payable clerk and the accounts receivable clerk. Both clerks answer to accounting supervisor, who fills a third job. Manika Raj is the accounting supervisor at Beta Enterprises. While she was going to school, Manika worked at Beta Enterprises as a part-time clerk. When she graduated from high school, she was hired as an accounts payable clerk. Several years later, Manika was promoted to the position of accounting supervisor. Her job involves supervising the work, the accounting clerks preparing journal entries, posting journal entries to the general ledger, and preparing a general ledger trial balance. Manika receives source documents after George and Mary post them directly to the accounts receivable and accounts payable ledgers. So the four things that Manika would deal with are right there. Okay, so she's got the four things at the top. From there, things go into the journal. From there, they go into the general ledger. And from there, they go into the making a trial balance. Preparing journal entries. Journal entries are prepared to record the source document, sales invoice, cash receipt list, purchase invoices, and check copies that George and Mary send to Manika. So sales invoices. The journal entry to record sales invoices is shown below. Notice that in this entry, individual customers are not debited. Instead, just the accounts receivable control account is debited. Also, several sales documents are totaled and recorded in one entry. This is known as batch accounting. So in this one, we have accounts receivable and sales and HST payable. Now, they don't need to include in the back of this who the accounts receivable was for, because the other two employees in the accounts payable and accounts receivable, they've already done that part for us. Batch journalizing is used to efficiently record similar transactions that are frequently repeated. Suppose a business issues 35 invoices to customers over a short period of time. For each invoice, the accounting supervisor makes one journal entry. So here in this one, they're showing just one journal entry. And down here, they're showing the total. So the total in accounts receivable, the total going to sales, and the total going to HST payable. And it says here to record invoices 101 to 135. So instead of doing 35 different transactions, they're allowed to batch it together and do only one. The entry to record the cash received from customers is shown below. Same thing can happen. They can do it individually like this, or they can batch them together like this. And I think if you go back here, it tells you here too what days they're totaling together. Purchase invoices, the accounting supervisor's journal entry to record invoices for supplies, miscellaneous expense and equipment is shown below. So they're batching all of those together and putting them into the accounts payable. The entry to record payments to creditors is shown below. The entry records several documents, checks 71 to 73. So they're paying a total of $1,200, and so their cash has to be credited $1,200. Posting to the journal. Monique is also responsible for posting the journal entries to the general ledger accounts. So once it's in the journal here, you need to take them and put them into each of these accounts, like your supplies, your miscellaneous, your equipment, your HST refundable, which you would have learned already in Accounting 10, so that shouldn't come to a surprise as well. What else can I show you here? So this is just an example of some more different kinds of transactions. I'm not going to go through them. They're there for you. They're just a continuation of Accounting 10, so nothing new there. One thing you need to remember is that expense accounts, just in case you forgot, they have a normal debit balance. And anytime you pay an expense, it actually is increasing that account. There's more going into that account. It's not like a liability where you're paying it off. So on expense accounts will always be debited if they're increased and credited if they are decreased. And you will never actually see a decrease, only an increase. Okay, so that's called direct posting procedures, is when you take things and you directly put them in. There's also something called indirect posting procedures. Many businesses, especially smaller firms, want to use a subsidiary ledger system, even though they are still small enough to have one clerk perform all accounting tasks. These businesses use an alternative method of posting to the subsidiary ledgers, and it's called an indirect posting. Procedure allows the accounting clerk to record all source documents in the general ledger and then post to both the general ledger and the control counts. So that's the part that's different, and the individual subsidiary ledger accounts. The changes in procedure required to use this system. Transactions that change the value of accounts receivable or accounts payable must be double posted. So what is meant by double posting? We can look at this transaction here. We have accounts payable, 226, sales credited 200, HST payable 26. Notice that the entry indicates the name of the customer as well as the fact that accounts receivable is affected. Now, why is this required? In the indirect posting system, both the general ledger and the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger are posted from the general journal. Let's examine the posting procedure. The posting of 226 to the accounts receivable control account in the general ledger is indicated by placing the number in the post reference column. That's this one, this 110 here. Now, the only thing that has to happen is that we have to make sure that this person's account is also going to be affected. And when that has happened, when we post that amount to this person's account, we're using that check mark to show that we've taken care of that. And why are two posting required to record the accounts receivable portion of the transaction? Two postings are required so that the control account and the subsidiary ledger remain in balance. Because if we change the accounts receivable and we don't change this person's account, it's not going to stay in balance. What are other transactions would require double posting? Any transactions that involve the accounts payable control account must be double posted. So this one shows that the 210 went to accounts payable, and this check mark shows that we went and put that to this customer's account as well. Now, is this a double posting required in this following entry? You have D beta drawings, and your cash is being affected. Now, there isn't any other accounts being affected there, like subsidiary accounts, so you don't need to do double posting there. So summary of indirect posting looks like this. And when you go to do the questions, you'll be able to see in the questions that I've given you with the answer keys, it'll be able to tell you which process to follow.